can take some blood. Show me how strong you are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Back Lot Banter Movie Reviews. My name is Tucker Hazel, and I, of course, am joined by my co-host, who is just chock full of bodily fluids, Tanner Dykstra, and today we are here to talk about the next movie from the dark and twisted mind of Brandon Cronenberg, son of David. But if you want to talk to us about the dark and twisted thoughts in your head, please join our Discord. That link is in the top of the description. And while you're down there, subscribe to our channel, ring the bell so you know when we are doing other reviews of dark and twisted movies, and leave a comment letting us know your favorite David Cronenberg movie, or if you've seen Possessor or Infinity Pool and that tops your list, mention those down below and tell us why you like those movies, you sick bastards.
Viral as well. It's another Brandon Cronenberg film.
Oh, I didn't know about that one. Actually, I hadn't heard about that. But Tanner, you are the more experienced Brandon Cronenberg alumnus of the two of us. You have seen Possessor. I have not. We have seen Infinity Pool, and we're very interested to talk about it. But I want to hear your thoughts about Infinity Pool.
Well, Tucker, I was very excited for Infinity Pool because I love Possessor, Brandon Cronenberg's 2020 film starring...
Your favorite movie of that year, if I'm not mistaken.
You are not mistaken. Starring the now infamous Andrea Riseborough.
True.
But here we have Mia Goth, a hot-off-the-presses horror girl icon, coming off of X and Pearl last year, and Alexander Skarsgård, hot off of The Northman from last year. So we got some two hot bods, two hot personalities here.
Yeah.
In a Brandon Cronenberg film that seems to be a class satire, bringing in his sort of Cronenbergian ideas of we're all over the place with visuals, and we're doing some body horror stuff, and I quite enjoyed it. I can see myself cooling on it over time, but coming out of it, I'm thinking it was an engaging and interesting story. I really like Mia Goth. I really like Alexander Skarsgård. I think the supporting cast is good. Brandon Cronenberg is a very talented director. I think he does some very interesting things with the camera in this film.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, those trippy sequences, those what we were talking about. What Brandon Cronenberg seems to be more interested in the trippy visuals more than like a body,
much more surreal, experimental.
Yes, thank you. Than his father David. I just felt a little unfulfilled with it in this film, especially as compared to Possessor, because it struck me as a bit more unique in that film. But
as someone who hasn't seen Possessor, I didn't have the ability to draw that direct comparison, but I have seen a lot of experimental films that this film seems to be drawing from. The works of Kenneth Anger and other experimental filmmakers from even like the 50s and 60s and 70s, when experimental film was just trying to like come to fruition. This seems to be drawing on that with flashing colors and lights and lots of sexual imagery intercut with flashing lights and bulging cameras and stuff like that. It is very interesting and visually unique. We don't get many movies like this put onto the big screen with this kind of crisp visuals and high name talent, and son of a big director, but probably an up and coming big name director. I was really interested by this movie, and I did like it at the end of the day. But I do think when I am going into a movie like what David Cronenberg has done, I'm more looking for the visual style and the body horror aspects that this family seems to be so great at, and have been so great at, placed on top of characters that I find really interesting. And I think, unfortunately, that's a little bit where this movie falters to me, because I think it starts off very strong. You're introduced to God, what's his character's name? Sorry. Yeah, you're introduced to James Foster. He's Jamesy, of course, and iconically called Jamesy, who's vacationing on an island with his much richer wife, and he's trying to look for inspiration for his next book. And then it starts to devolve as he meets Mia Goth and her husband, and weird things start happening. And where I was most intrigued by this movie was that first 45 minutes, I would say, when we're getting introduced to the concept of this ridiculously named country that's maybe an island, maybe part of a mainland. It's really hard to tell. It's very ambiguous. The culture that involves any crime you commit, you get killed for, and they have, if you're rich enough, you can pay for a body to be created for you, a double of your body to be executed in your place. And I'm like, boom, this is fascinating. This is a pretty simple and subtle sci-fi concept, but one that like has real psychological impacts. Like, how does this impact our characters' well-being, having seen themselves be killed? This is what is the culture of this place? And I think that while I'm getting introduced to that, I'm like, wow, this could be something super, super special. And I do think it is special, but I think it doesn't go full in on that premise. And I'm a lorehead. I like when a world is fully explained. I like when we learn the history of these kind of concepts, when we really delve into the societal impacts that things like this have. And I think they're touched on here, absolutely. But the movie concerns itself so much stronger with people going crazy for like the second half or third of the movie, last third of the movie, that I feel like it lost its way a little bit. And I was getting more intrigued by the visuals because that starts ramping up more towards the end, but I was getting a little less connected to the characters and story because I think it kind of just like started going too fast and crazy and didn't feel as grounded to me.
Yeah, I mean, what this story is largely concerned with is a thematic line of what the wealthy and powerful will do in a world without consequences.
Yeah.
When you take away the ultimate consequence of punishment for your crimes, but also, like, mortality. They seem to not fear their own mortality, having seen their clones killed. And by the way, should we say, but that's not apparent in any of the trailers, by the way.
Yeah, it is. They talk about that.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I don't know where to draw a spoiler line on this then. So
neither do I. Yeah.
Full spoilers. Whatever.
Full spoilers. Sure.
Yeah. But anyway, we're in a world without consequence for these rich people, and yes, you do see it slowly devolve, and there are hints dropped.
I would say pretty quickly devolve, actually.
Sure. Anyway, there are hints dropped along the way. I believe Mia Goth's character, Mandy, something like that.
Yeah.
She says towards the end of the film, they like sought James out for some reason. I guess they just wanted to recruit them in their club of zombies, as they call it, because they are the living dead in a way. And yeah, I think that thematic line is good. I think it's strong. I just don't think it's very complex.
Sure.
And ultimately, it does what it wants to. And I think, again, I'm going to keep returning to this. I think Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth are very good in those roles.
Yes.
When you see Mia Goth, she has this sort of like veneer that you can see almost immediately, especially if you have seen her acting in the trailers, which come the parts of the later in the film. You're like, this is a veneer of like, I'm a normal and well-adjusted person, and I'm approaching you, my favorite author, James What's-Your-Face. I love your book, yada yada yada. Come out to this weird spot by the ocean with me and my husband. It'll be totally normal. And then Alexander Skarsgård, on the other hand, is losing his mind as he's exposed to this world of cloning and rich zombie people who do whatever they want because they can get out of crimes and their own mortality and being and they enjoy watching their clones be murdered. I think they both do good jobs in ingratiating themselves and also the audience into this world.
Yeah, and I think that's especially sold to me because James doesn't know anything about this culture. He, even at the beginning of the film, one of the first lines that he says is, "Where are we?" Like, he's not even fully sure like what this place is, why they're not, tourists aren't supposed to leave the compound. And when he's dropped into a jail cell and told, no, you're going to die for this, or you can pay a bunch of money and make a clone of yourself that's killed in your stead, I'm like, you can see the look on his face. He's confused. He's like, he's had a weird night. He's nursing a hangover, and his performance really sells those. And I think that the confusion that he has for that first half is fantastic acting. And that energy is also carried over to when he just goes completely ballistic and is like equally parts ballistic and confused and visceral and animalistic and all these things towards the end, that Mia Goth also keeps like upping and upping as she just goes crazier and crazier, and she's yelling more and she's throwing things and sitting on a car hood. Those performances are really what sell these characters to the degree that they do. I just wish that there was more backstory, there was more meat on the bones for the character's development, because there's not really character development for either of them. I guess there's character development on James's side, and then Gabby, by the way, her character's name is Gabby. Gabby just obviously is the same across the entire movie, and I think that is maybe why I felt like the film was not living up to its fullest potential, because I do think that there is these themes and concepts are so intricate and interesting that I would have loved to have seen him wrestle with this more. The fact that he is doing things he he wouldn't think he was going to be doing earlier, and his wife is gone, so they can't have conversations. I think that there's a few choices that are made there that gear itself towards more of viscerality and showing ridiculous things rather than like putting a complete and interesting bow on these themes, which, you know, maybe is what they're going for. Maybe it's just supposed to be kind of messy and ridiculous and visceral. But I look for something a little more closed off in my films, and that's just a different of taste, I guess.
Let's talk. You mentioned, we mentioned up top rather, what a fantastic director Brandon Cronenberg is, and what he does with the camera in this. So let's stop talking about what we hear in the dialogue and the character arcs and all that nonsense. Let's talk about what we see. What we see. And I just really like, especially what struck me was the close-ups in this. The focus,
some of the extremist close-ups I've ever seen in my entire life.
The focus that Brandon Cronenberg puts on the muscle twitches and the lips of his characters as they're moving, as they're saying these lines, and their eyes darting around, and they get close to each other. It's very intimate. It's very sexual, as you said, very sexually charged film. I think it's really cool because this film, it does feel intimate in those moments as James and Gabby are I guess James is falling into Gabby's trap at a certain point. And you do feel that the sexual tension that they have. I think that's also important to capture in this film. And that was apparent in the marketing with Alexander Skarsgård being led around on a leash by Mia Goth in some of these red carpet things. The sexual nature of the sexual relationship between those two characters is displayed very well, sometimes quite overtly, especially towards the end.
I think that the camera work and the shot choices are some of what most impresses me here, and are the most artistic aspect of this that I think even blow away some of what David Cronenberg has done. I've seen quite a few of his movies, but what really struck me very early on in the film is this really interesting decision to make the establishing shots of this compound, this resort they're staying at, instead of just a normal craning up shot, you know, like the beginning of Halloween, with John Carpenter like pulling up from Baby Michael Myers. It's like that, but the camera's like drunk, so it's like twisting around as it's going up. I'm like, whoa, and I found that to be really interesting. The film is, yes, you're right, probably best at those really hyper interesting close-ups that are capturing the subtlest emotions that a human being can possibly display, but it's also really good in this environmental photography. Wherever they filmed this, I think someone said Croatia,
Hungary, Eastern Europe, it seems.
Sure, but like some fantastic nature imagery, some trees against sunsets and rolling waves and these very pristine resort pagodas and not pagodas, verandas and beach umbrellas, and it's very pristine and well choreographed and set in these environments. But that's the big scale, and it's also great at the small scale. So absolutely fantastic job on the visual side from Brandon Cronenberg.
I love the depth of field here. There's lots of things in that scene we were talking about where James is brought in for questioning after the inciting. Well, we said full spoilers. He runs a guy over with a car. He's brought in for questioning, and there's depth of field at play there. I think that there's some really cool stuff with. The editing as well, I also wanted to bring up, because something that we had a conversation about with you and I and our two friends after walking out of this was this is decidedly more comedic than Brandon Cronenberg's past work. Me being experienced with Possessor. It's satirical in a way. We're talking about satirizing, the wealthy and the powerful, which seems to be a running theme in many films, especially as of late. And there's a particular hard cut from the Gabby's sort of gang of rich zombie people doing a home invasion, and then hard cut to them all sitting around in prison, and they're like complaining to the guards, like, we've been waiting here for hours, like they're at a restaurant. Another great scene, but they're in prison awaiting to be cloned, and then they're having their clones executed. So I think that is those comedic stylings are a definite decision that Brandon makes in this.
And I think that was another great choice of this movie, to have a sense of levity to it, because it did make these characters feel a little more well-rounded, because otherwise they are just kind of crazy rich characters that go around shooting people and smashing things and making jokes and pulling really scary, dangerous pranks on James. And that they don't have a lot of depth in that way, but giving them that, like, they're so deranged that they're comedic is I think a nice touch, because it gives us these sequences where they're so out of base, off touch with what normal human interaction is, that like we like laugh at their indecision of these moments.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it is the a natural human response to laugh.
Yeah.
I think back to all the time. I'm gonna bring up the film Hereditary, not Hereditary,
Sure.
excuse me, Midsummer.
Oh, okay.
In this, because when I saw that in a theater, people were laughing at Midsummer. I was like, this isn't a particularly funny film, but we are uncomfortable with what we are seeing to the point where we're like, I have to laugh at this. I have to express my disbelief somehow when I choose to laugh. And I think that's the same here. But also that aesthetic, that sort of mood that Brandon Cronenberg sets in this, just allows for, especially Mia Goth, just to go over the top with these manic mannerisms, screaming and screeching and like on the verge of tears at times, and then laughing and degrading James. And then on the other hand, Alexander Skarsgård being like in a depressive, sappy mood and going in and out of hangovers and being high and drunk at the same time. I think it allows for
crossed.
Crossed. Excuse me, as the kids say, crossed. I think it just allows for those two actors to have plenty of a big sandbox to play in.
Yeah. Let's talk. I feel like we're kind of wrapping up. I think let's talk about the biggest point of contention about this movie is that it's so graphic and ridiculous, and people are leaving the theater because it's just so dark and twisted.
Is that a thing that has been said?
Well, I don't know. I guess maybe that's what I expected to hear, or I've heard a little bit, but...
Actually, you give your thoughts on it, and then I want to say what my hypothesis is.
Okay. Well, I wasn't as shocked by what this movie did. I think it's because it doesn't lean into body horror as much as I thought it would. I thought that the idea of there being these clone bodies that are ostensibly the exact same as these people, and you can do whatever you want with them, like I thought they're gonna lean more into that and have like people with their arms cut off, like torturing people and stuff. I thought that's really where it was going to lead to. But it largely doesn't. And I think most of the graphic imagery in here is contained in 1.5 really sexual sequences that are
fighting as well, like violence, just like fist fighting, stabbing, stuff like that.
There is some violence, but it's even like stabbing or punching or whatever that is graphically shown, and there is blood, and there's blood spurting out of it, slitting a guy's neck, but and yeah, I've seen a lot of movies like that, but that's not even the most ridiculous stuff that David Cronenberg has done. So I think I expected there to be a little more body horror ridiculousness, but it is the sexual imagery here is probably the most graphic sexual imagery I've seen in a theatrically released film, at least personally.
Yeah, I think it might just be a thing of overhyping it, mayhaps.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there's one particular tweet that I think a lot of people saw. And I am sure the marketing also leading into that, because that is the reputation that the Cronenbergs have. And if you're marketing a Cronenberg film, even if it is a Brandon Cronenberg film, you're going to be like, it's body horror. It's the grossest thing you've ever seen. It's this and this and that. That's how you're going to get butts in seats, essentially.
Sure, of course.
And this film doesn't necessarily live up to that, but I don't think it has to. I don't think that I want Brandon Cronenberg to be, a lot of people are talking about how he's trying to break out of the shadow of David a little bit, trying to do some different things.
Sure.
And I don't know if him going full bore into body horror is going to help him do that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I again haven't seen any of the other movies. I think that he is certainly making himself distinct here, and David did obviously have some movies with heavily utilizing sexual imagery and stuff, but this was significantly more explicit than those. And yeah, it was absolutely a choice. And I think the choice to have those kind of sexually explicit images mixed in with lots of experimental filmmaking and crazy flashy editing and colored lights, and everything just sort of mashing together into this hypnotic visual feast, I thought was really cool, and definitely something I haven't seen again in a theatrically released film. I've watched a lot of experimental short films, especially older ones that do something like this, but watching it in this fidelity with actors of names I recognize, like on the big screen with my boys sitting next to me, that was a unique experience.
Sure, yeah. I just don't feel to put a bow on it, and what I said about it not feeling particularly unique is that there are like art house horror films that do similar imagery, flashing lights, undulating naked women, things like that. What's real, what's fake? Oh, we're seeing frames of faces, and what was that? I didn't catch that, but it makes me feel slightly disturbed. This is a staple now of like art house horror.
Yeah.
And it seems Brandon Cronenberg just kind of went stock standard with it. And I find I'm a little disheartened by that, but I still enjoyed the film overall. Yeah.
Tanner, what would you give Infinity Pool?
Right now, I'm gonna give it a flat 8 out of 10, 8.0. Okay.
And as you said, you might cool on it over time, but hey, that's what these reviews are for. They're a snapshot of our thoughts about an hour after we leave the theater, and after about an hour after leaving the theater, I'm a little bit lower than you. I think I'll give this film like a 7.3 out of 10. I thought it was very good. It's very distinct, and I think that's what I'm looking for going into a movie like this. I haven't seen anything like this on the big screen ever, and I probably will going in the future as I am now a Brandon Cronenberg fan. I've liked the movie that I've seen from him, and I'm excited to see what he does in the future. And if he's able to recapture with a modern twist the energy that made his father such a household name in creative horror.
I believe not Brandon Cronenberg, David Cronenberg's daughter, whose name I don't remember off the top of my head, I believe she is releasing her first feature film this year as well.
The Cronenberg CU expands.
Yes, it does. But I'll be excited to see that if we can get our eyes and ears on it.
We will certainly be reviewing that if we can see it. But in the meantime, there are plenty of other movies that we will be seeing and reviewing here for your viewing pleasure, our reviewing pleasure. We will see you guys in those reviews in the future. Thanks for watching.